This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
So why is some organizations more successful at innovation than others? Some just knock it out of the park while others struggle. Over the years, I've collected up a set of what I call the laws of innovation. Now, I wrote about this in a blog post back last fall, but what I want to do is take this podcast and go into a little bit of more detail to give you the background and more specifics about each of these laws and what I was thinking when I pulled this together. Now, I will readily admit that I pulled this list together, again, as a collection of companies that I've seen as being highly successful and those organizations that have struggled. Now, no single organization will be able to be successful in all of these laws, right? There's always opportunities to improve. There's always opportunities to do better. So, let's get started. Law number one is what I call the law of leadership. Now, why did I put this as the first law? One is that leadership sets the tone within an organization. Leadership needs to be out there in front and not just giving lip service to innovation. One of the things I've started collecting most recently are annual reports from public companies and counting how many times the CEO uses the word innovation in the opening letter in the annual report. It's amazing how that word now is being used and bantered about basically as a way to either convey something that the organization isn't doing, or it's just simply what I refer to as buzzword bingo. You need to have the word in that annual report, otherwise shareholders are going to be upset. There's a difference between acting as an innovation leader and being an innovation leader. In this case, from a standpoint of leadership, it includes the board, the CEO, and his or her direct reports. And it's not about just talking about it, it's about walking the talk. One question I recently asked a group of CEOs of mid-cap companies was how much time did they spend not just talking about innovation, but actually doing innovation, engaged with their innovation teams, thinking about innovations for their business. And I said, if you're not spending at least 10% of your time working on innovation, then you're not serious about it. And that does not account you off talking to your board or making presentations to your board of directors. If you're a leader within the organization, you need to commit at least 10% of your time thinking about innovation. Now, if you're within an organization and you're not the CEO, how much time does your CEO spend thinking about innovation? Are they really engaged and really involved, or is it just, some review process that they go through? If innovation's the core, the CEO set the tone. And if the CEO is serious about innovation, if the board is serious about innovation, if the senior executives are serious about innovation, then they're out leading from the front. They're walking the talk. And those are the organizations that are going to be wildly successful. Law number two is the law of culture. Now, one of the things I learned over my career, and I wish I had learned it earlier in my career, was the importance of culture as regards to innovation. I have a saying that I've put together now that it's become pretty much a mantra for me, and that is, culture eats strategy for lunch. And I'm serious. What I have found out over my years of frustrations of trying to get large organizations to change direction, to adapt, to innovate, is you got to deal with the culture first. You've got to inject and create a culture of innovation in order to support a strategy of innovation. Now, there's lots of components that come into play when you think about culture. It includes people. People need to feel ownership of the innovation agenda. They need to be equipped. They need to be skilled. This takes time. It's not all of a sudden you read a book on the weekend and you come in on Monday and you go, okay, we're now an innovation culture. It takes time. You have to equip them. People have to feel like they're prepared. The culture also has to value ideas. Ideas need to be actively solicited, not only from inside but outside, and they need to be valued and they need to be nurtured, not criticized. People need to be rewarded for submitting ideas. They need to be rewarded for submitting ideas that have huge impact. Those need to be the new leaders not just the person who goes out and bags the big sales deal, but you need to elevate and reward the people who are coming up with those big ideas that transform the organization. Another component of culture is alignment. All the resources need to be aligned. If you got one part of the organization that has a culture of, bag them and tag them, go close the deal, and you've got another part of the organization which is, all politicized as to promotionability, and a third part of your organization whose priorities and culture is about teamwork, guess what? That organization is non-functional. All of that needs to be aligned. Resources need to be aligned with objectives, needs to be aligned with strategy that's aligned with the culture. If any of those are out of alignment, the organization has become highly inefficient. And one of the other areas of culture is communication. Communication needs to be clear. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be, pulling these all of the members of the organization in from the standpoint of their value, their role, and how what you're doing aligns with the underlying culture and objectives of the organization. So again, culture. This is one area that I'd wish I'd spent more time on earlier in my career. I'm a late learner in this one, but I am a firm believer that if you're going to have a highly effective innovation organization, you need to have a culture of innovation established. And you need to start working on the culture first before you even think about your innovation strategy. So again, will culture eat strategy for lunch? Focus on the culture. Third law is the law of resources. Resources for me include people, money, time, equipment. And the problem with most organizations is that they will allocate resources to innovation, but they don't protect it, right? We'll fund it with time and with people and get going, but they don't protect it, meaning it's the resource that says, if we have a tough quarter, I'm going to go in and shut down that program, or we're not going to fund it as much, or we're going to turn off the procurement system at the end of the quarter to stop any spending to help boost the numbers going into the quarterly results, all those kinds of things, right? If you're truly serious about innovation, you get the discipline of allocating those resources and then protecting them, not allowing those resources to be manipulated, used, abused, stopped. Resources that are allocated to innovation need to be protected, and they need to be given, autonomy to be able to go off and execute, and not part of the thrashing within the organization. And this, in case, is very difficult for a lot of executives, right? Because you're asking executives to literally have a split personality. Innovation, you allocate those resources hands off. Other resources, you're constantly manipulating to align them with the short-term objectives. But you need to figure out that alignment, and you need to have that discipline that, yes, executives need to have that kind of split personality of long-range view, long-range investment, long-range commitment of resources with meeting short-term objectives and the short-term quarterly results. And real top innovation leaders are able to do both. The fourth law is the law of patience. This is probably the one law that most organizations struggle with the most. Patience is critical for innovation. Innovation doesn't happen fast. It takes time. Get used to it. This is a challenge for organizations. It falls into kind of what I refer to as the rule of 18. And the rule of 18 is where you come up with a very exciting program, management gets excited, they find some dollars in the current budget to kind of get the idea going. That's great. You go to the next billing or budget cycle. In the next budget cycle, people are still excited about it. So that item or that project is put into the budget for the next year. Now you get to the second full budget cycle. If that project hasn't delivered or isn't seen as being able to have some near-term impact, going into that second budget cycle, it's at risk of being killed. It's what I call the rule of 18. You can go back, and particularly large organizations, go back and look and see where these projects kind of hit that 14, 16, 18, 20-month kind of window where they're going to come into the second budget cycle and all of a sudden they're getting killed. So the way to get around some of these things is you got to plan and allocate those resources such that you can actually deliver things sooner rather than later. But the burden really needs to fall on management. Management needs to have patience. They need to have patience when it comes to innovations. It's not about just driving to the quarterly results. Some innovations will take 2, 3, 5, 10, and in some cases even 20 years. Right? The one example I always like to use is David Packard when HP decided to go into the computer business. David actually wasn't even in support of that strategy. He didn't believe HP could win. But being convinced by his senior leaders, David committed the organization to going into the computer industry. But not just to go into the computer industry, but to become number one. David Packard issued a memo to the HP employees saying that HP was committing to the computer industry and that the entire organization was committing to become the number one PC and computer manufacturer in 20 years. Interestingly enough, HP became number one in year 17. It's those kinds of long-term commitments, resources, patience in particular, that says this is not a 1-year bet or a 2-year bet, but in this case, this is going to be a 20-year bet in order to become the leader in that segment. Does your organization have the discipline to have that kind of patience? Maybe not. But at least do they have the commitment that says it's going to take 3 to 4 years to be committed to be the number one or to become the leader within the segment that you're going after. Law of patience. Organizations need to be patient when it comes to driving these innovation changes. The fifth law is the law of process. Process is important. Innovation is not just a serendipity thing. You don't slip on the bar of soap, bang your head, and eureka. There is a process. There is a flow. You need to create a process. Now, you can take somebody else's process and apply it, but what I encourage organizations to do is to go talk to the best people out there who are driving innovation programs in large organizations or even small organizations. Learn how they do it, rip off the best ideas, and apply it to your organization. You need to adapt and adopt. You need to adapt the processes so it fits within your culture, your management style, your leadership style, your industry segment, your competitive positioning. All those variables need to have an influence on what is the right process that you're going to use. But you need to establish a process. Now, the process needs to cover the full innovation chain, everything from how do you capture ideas to how do you generate more and better ideas to how do you identify the best ideas to how do you actually execute those ideas. If you've been a listener to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I propose a process called FIRE. Focus, ideation, ranking, and execution. Focus. Where are you searching? Where's the best areas to search for innovations within your particular problem space, your industry, etc.? Ideation. How do you capture ideas? How do you generate ideas? What's a better approach to coming up with more better ideas? Ranking. How do you go through the big pool of ideas you have and select the best ideas? And then execution. How do you actually translate an idea into a real innovation that delivers value in the marketplace? You need to have a process. If you don't have a process, create one. If you've got a process, improve upon it. Never let your innovation process become stagnant. If you're using the exact same process year after year after year, that in effect becomes a blinder, becomes a constraint. So not only do you need a process, but you also need the discipline to constantly innovate your innovation process. The sixth law is the law of the BHAG. Now, what do I mean by a BHAG? BHAG is bold, hairy, audacious goal. This is setting the bar out there that strives your team to achieve and do things never done before. And that's really the whole objective of innovation. It's not about doing the same thing your competitors are doing or doing it the same way you've always done it. By setting out that BHAG, you're forcing the team to reach beyond anything that was even possible. BHAGs have some unique characteristics. One is that they are very clear and concise in what the target is. We're going to go solve coming up with a drug that's going to solve, cure cancer, or it's a device that's going to be, half as, thick as the competitor's products. Very clear goals. So that way the team can rally, they know what the objective is, and they get that sense of satisfaction when they cross the goal line. It also needs to be a stretch, right? It needs to be something that's going to be far enough out there. Now, as a leader, you need to be careful with the BHAG. A lot of times people will set these audacious goals out there, but not only do they set the goal, but they then dictate to the team how to get there. And that's the mistake. Leaders do not dictate how. Think back to John F. Kennedy, right? Kennedy didn't design the rockets that got the U.S. to the moon. He just simply set the BHAG to put man on the moon, and he let the teams innovate the process of how do you get that to put the man on the moon. So be careful. Set the BHAG as the target objective. Do not dictate how. Let the process of innovation within your organization define the how. And the seventh law is the law of execution. Now, execution is that task of going from idea all the way through and ultimately putting a product, a service, experience, whatever it is, out there for your customers to buy, enjoy, benefit from, however they will, engage with whatever you're offering. Ideas without execution are a hobby. And I'm not in the hobby business. The whole purpose of innovation, the whole definition of innovation, is the translation of idea to impact. And so you need to drive and you need to have a consistent approach, an aggressive approach to execution. Having lots of ideas and having the fun of brainstorming sessions and eating lots of pizza, fun, great, everybody gets all charged up, but the value is zero. There's no value, no success until you take that idea and actually deliver something that's of value. Now, what I would encourage is for you to think about segmenting the execution into phases. Put a little bit of money in, prove out the idea, put a little bit more money in, prove out more of the idea. Very much of a venture kind of a model rather than, we need, $400 million to go do X into the marketplace. By allocating and segmenting out the execution phases, one is that you can kill projects early that are not going to make it, that just aren't successful. And that's not a bad thing. Not all ideas are going to be successful. The other is it allows you to reduce your risk. You learn early, learn fast, fail fast. If the ideas aren't going to work out, you kill it. You've only put in a little bit of money. You haven't committed the entire budget and the entire organization for ultimately be successful. But keep in mind, the objective for execution is to execute, not to talk about execution and not to put out pretty Gantt charts and that. It's to actually execute. So in review, again, the 7 laws for innovation are the law of leadership, the law of culture, the law of resources, the law of patience, the law of process, the law of the BHAG, and the law of execution. As I said in the beginning, not all organizations are going to be in a position to be successful across all of these laws. What I would suggest you do as kind of a next step is think about each of these laws and go into your organization and rank yourself. How good are you? Right? And just do a score from 0 to 10. And maybe it's just not your score. Maybe you have, a bunch of different executives and different employees within the organization listen to this podcast or read the blog post from last fall and then have them go through and score their organization on a 0 to 10. How good are you in each of these areas? The organizations and parts of the laws that you're struggling with, that gives you an area of focus. Do you need to be more conscious, for instance, on patience? Or do you need to be more conscious on the issue of culture and how you're going to adapt the culture to be more innovative? Right? So in addition to doing your innovations and coming up with ideas, you need to take a look at these 7 areas within your organization and be honest. Be brutally, truthfully honest with yourself and say, where is it we are today? How good are we? And where is it that we can improve? Because there's always areas and opportunities for improvement. And by simply focusing on these areas, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of 90% of the people out there. Just by spending time thinking on this and constantly improving in these areas, you will be better equipped to take advantage of the ideas you do generate, which will put you way ahead of your competitors. So good luck, take a whack at it, and drop me an email if I can answer any questions you might have on how to take a look at these things within your organizations. So as we wrap up, thank you for listening to this week's podcast. Send me your feedback at philmckinney.com. So the email address is feedback@philmckinney.com. As I've said in many of the podcasts before, my first book is out, Beyond the Obvious. It's out at Barnes & Noble and all the print bookstores you can think of. It's also available in digital, so Kindle and Nook, and on iTunes. And then also the audiobook is out. But I'll warn you, it's not my voice on the audiobook. It was done by HarperCollins, who has the rights to the audiobook rights for my book. They were the ones who actually hired someone to do it, so don't get all upset when you buy it. It's not my voice. Again, send me feedback. We just went over the 7-year anniversary of the podcast, so March 22nd. So that would have been, 3 days ago from today's date when I'm recording this. So we just went over 7 years with the podcast. I want to thank you for being a loyal listener to the podcast. It means a lot to me. You've been very, very supportive over the last 7 years, and I truly do appreciate it. Buy the book, because in the back of the book, there's a shout-out to you, the listeners of the podcast. It's through your support and emails and encouragement that not only kept me going and doing the podcast over the last 7 years, but ultimately led to my decision and having literally the 7 or 6 years of content from the podcast to be used as kind of the basis for the book. So again, the book, Beyond the Obvious, Killer Questions That Spark Game-Changing Innovation. It's available from Hyperion, and it's out there now. I would encourage you to pick it up and take a read. There's lots of new material in there that has never been covered in the podcast, so you'll learn some more details about all the fun and the struggles that I've had over my career, but more importantly, how you can avoid some of the pitfalls that I got myself into and how to be more innovative within your own organization or just to be more creative yourself. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the podcast. Again, send me email, send me feedback, send me topics, ideas, questions you might have, things that you would like to have covered in the future podcast. As you can tell, I'm getting back onto a regular schedule now of putting out this podcast back to the old schedule that it was, and hopefully you're enjoying that. As you know, the reason I do this podcast is my way of paying it forward. Bob Davis, my early mentor, put a lot of time and a lot of energy that laid the foundation for my career success. And when I asked him how I could pay him back, I couldn't. He says, you can't pay it back, pay it forward. So my objective with this podcast and with the all of the material that I make freely available at philmckinney.com is my way of paying it forward. Hopefully helping you with your career, your activities, what's going on within your organization. The only thing I ask from you is that you pay it forward. Let others know about the podcast and about the blog site. I would truly appreciate if you would put a link up on your site to the podcast or to the blog, that you would let others know about it, that you would help promote it, make it more people aware of it. As my way of paying it back to my early mentors. It would really mean a lot to me. So, again, thanks for your time. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.